You know what? I'm too full. I couldn't possibly finish that. Oh, hello there. You know, this instance makes me think of something I've been pondering a lot about lately, and that is food wastage in the world. You see, now when we can produce more food than ever before, there are still so many people dying of hunger and starvation. So why is that? Why is it that people are going hungry when we can produce more than enough food to feed everyone in the whole world? Well, a large part of it is obviously food distribution, but a lot of it is also food wastage. And that sounds like the perfect topic for this week's Philosophy Friday. Food wastage, there are many reasons. First of all, what happens at the farms? Farms need to produce such a quality of product, and that doesn't always necessarily mean the highest quality of nutrition, but it also means they need to produce very high quality of visual standard for the food. A lot of things that may not fit that visual standard are quite quickly discarded, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of tons every day not fitting a certain standard that is quite up to the supermarket standard, what you might find there. What is very good is now that a lot of other programs and organizations are taking these, what are sometimes called seconds, foods that don't fit the beauty standards of us now, and repurposing them, reusing them, reselling them for a lower cost, which is a fantastic thing. Food at a lower cost, still with the same nutritional value, still the same food. It just doesn't look exactly like it does on TV, if you will. A lot of farmers now are under pressure to grow so much food, and in doing so, because the soil is eroding because of monocropping in such large portions, the, let's say, fruits, vegetables, whatever it might be, are actually far more susceptible to disease that's spread throughout it. Much like the bananas happened in Australia many years ago, I still believe that is a common issue. When you only have that one type of food that's being grown, it is, the most susceptible to disease, just spreading through like wildfire. So much food is lost to this on a regular basis. Localizing food as well. Now, what's great about preservation with food is we're further along before than we ever have been. Preservation, like the first kinds of preservation of food would be back when humans really noticed that salt on food can preserve it for longer periods of time, stop it rotting, stop it putrefying. And the great thing about that is that allowed us to travel further, hold on to certain portions of food for longer. It basically was one of the main reasons we were able to turn from hunter and gatherer into large agricultural societies. So fantastic revelation there. Our methods of preservation have grown since. We can obviously freeze food now. We can do vac sealing food. So basically anything that produces the lowest ecology for bacteria to grow, and again, waste that food there. But we need to push that even further, because still so much food from the farm to the markets to a larger wholesaler, anything like that, is being lost because it's not preserved properly. There are a lot of, again, organizations, countries, specifically governments, who are working on these things there, whether it be storage housing, whether it be products to use that hopefully aren't too chemically damaging to the nutrition of the food, but will preserve it for longer periods of time. One other thing about that, though, is we could put more, whether you want to say encouragement onto farmers or governments to localize food, because now you can have fruits, vegetables, meats, whatever it might be, cheeses, any product really from all over the world. The further the food goes, even with certain methods of preservation, it does make it more susceptible to, whether it be even damage along the way. That food is getting more handled along more different resources there, or more different modes of transportation, and along the way it can be damaged, whether it be physically, whether it can again just be through bacteria, things like that, the wrong conditions, too much heat, too much cold, very much dependent on what the food is and how it is preserved. So I think having, by no means saying cut off the world supply to trade in food, but maybe encouraging local governments, anything like that, to rely more on a local source of food, especially somewhere like Canada now, where, for example, we have a much heavier winter here. So doing things like pickling and preserving foods that happen in the summertime so they can be used in the winter, but also now having the ability of something like massive greenhouses. We don't have to be susceptible entirely to the outside elements now. We have the technology to grow food in just about any climate using the right technology. So it's a really fantastic thing. Now, Fabi and myself have a lot of experience working both in commercial kitchens, whether it be in restaurants or in catering events. And I gotta say, personally, at the very least, this is probably one of the spaces where you'll see the most food wastage. I can't tell you how many times we've catered something like a wedding, a bar mitzvah, a birthday, what have you. And they will, the party goers, the host will order so much food from the catering company. They want to make sure that everyone there is well fed. And in every single case, there has not been a single time that we've been there that at the end of the night, very good, wholesome food is thrown away because we cook too much. It can't be stored properly afterwards. And this is including things that we'll leave for the host afterwards. We'll make them up as many care packages as we can. At the end of the day, it's just too much food. So I think if there were a way, and now this is maybe a bit more idealistic than practical, at least where we are now. This is something to shoot for in the future. I think if there were a way to incentivize, or let's say decentivize food waste, I think it's a bit harsh to say giving out fines for a certain amount of food wasting. Also, how do you police that? That's a very hard thing to do. But incentivizing companies or restaurants, anything like that, to use up as much as possible of their food. Again, if you go to a restaurant, you're having food that you want to be at least a certain standard. That's a lot of how restaurants function. It's a higher level than maybe what you can create at home. But there's definitely something that can be done there. I don't know the exact answer for how to police something like that, but I do think having incentives for companies, restaurants, catering, anything like that to use up as much of the food as possible, and disincentives for throwing away unnecessarily large amounts of food at the very end of it. Again, bit of a tricky one there of how to police. I think a large part of it as well comes down to the culture of food education. Now, from what I understand, back in home economics, it was taught how to cook food, use food, everything like that, but maybe not taught so much about food scarcity and then again, food preservation. In many cultures, it is taught to finish everything that's on your bowl, not to be greedy about it, of course, but to eat everything that's put in front of you, otherwise it is just going to go to waste. Food is a precious thing and we should treat it as such. Now, I think it's unrealistic to believe that everyone has time to cook every single one of their meals, to grow their own food, as was done back in the day as well. That's probably an unrealistic standard, but I do believe that people having more hands-on experience with the food they eat will make them far less inclined to throw away perfectly good food at the end of the day, just because they're simply too full or anything like that. I think it would make them, at the very least, want to preserve more of that food. So education is probably a large part of it there. Make kids understand that food shouldn't be wasted. I think also something that Fabi is involved in now, which is very fantastic, is one of the companies she works for, their part of the education they provide for the kids is teaching what food scarcity is. And I think that really will help them moving forward in, even if it's just perspective for the food that they eat, and maybe in what they purchase down the line in the future as well. Another good possible way to go about this, and this is actually already happening, is food banks. So things that, for example, farmers couldn't sell to the grocery store, whether it be for superficial reasons, still has to hit a certain quality of, a certain safe quality of food so it can be eaten and consumed. But food banks are basically anything that larger restaurants, larger supermarkets couldn't sell to the general public. maybe it's close to but has not passed the expiration date, and rather than letting it expire on the shelf and throwing it out, they can donate it to one of these food banks so people who are in less fortunate positions can benefit from this as well. And I think, again, one of the hard things about something like food wastage is how to, I don't want to use the word police it, because it shouldn't be something that's punished. It should be something that is encouraged. We should be encouraged to see food as valuable as it is, and also understand that not everyone has the access to the food that us in, say, the Western world or the progressive worlds have access to. So I think food wastage is a really big, and I understand fully that I'm very much learning and educating myself on this better. There have been many times where I've been cutting fruit or veg, and Fabi will remind me, actually, a lot of this is still usable, things that I would have necessarily thrown away myself. So it's very much a learning curve. It's based on how we grew up, what we learned in our interaction with food. I think also something that is close to our heart here is, if someone does want to consume meat, by all means you should. A very large part of various cultures is meat consumption, and in a lot of cultures as well, it's meat consumption of every usable part of that animal. Organ meat, things like offal, things that would not normally be consumed in, again, maybe more of a Western society, thrown away, incinerated, just going to waste when they are perfectly good, could be used. Maybe you have to treat them in a way. Again, maybe it comes down to people's education of how to cook. They wouldn't know how to cook these certain types of foods, certain types of offal to actually make them taste good. And if they don't know how to do that, they don't want to eat food that they don't like the flavor of, so they'd rather just throw it away or not buy it in the first place. So there is a large part of food that is very usable, very high quality, again, just going to waste there. But I do think that if we can at least reduce the amount of food waste in our culture, in our government, in our world, then there's a really big step towards, honestly, just it's a very beneficial thing for anyone and everyone. I think food distribution as well. If we lessen food waste, that means we have access to, at the end of the day, more food. That actually also means that we can potentially farm less food to put less stress on the land that is doing the farming, or any sort of agriculture, again, whether it be meat production, whether it be fruit and vegetables, things like that. So there are definitely a lot of things we can do at the end of the day to reduce food waste. And I think it would be a fantastic thing for everyone to be a part of. I don't think there's anyone who can't in some way benefit from it and also contribute to the solution. In terms of contributing, I'm going to finish every bite on my plate from now on. Thanks, mate. Happy Philosophy Friday. I hope you have a fantastic one. All right, good times.